First Love. Chapter 1. I was 16 years old at the time. The affair took place in the summer of 1833. I was living in Moscow, in my parents' house. They had hired a villa near the Kaluga barrier, opposite the Neskutchny Park. I was preparing for the university, but was working very little and was not in a hurry. No one restricted my freedom. I had done whatever I pleased ever since I had parted with my last French governor, who was utterly unable to reconcile himself to the thought that he had fallen, like a bomb, comme une bombe, into Russia, and with a stubborn expression on his face, wallowed in bed for whole days at a time. My father treated me in an indifferently affectionate way. My mother paid hardly any attention to me, although she had no children except me. Other cares engrossed her. My father, still a young man and very handsome, had married her from calculation. She was 10 years older than he. My mother led a melancholy life. She was incessantly in a state of agitation, jealousy, and wrath, but not in the presence of my father. She was very much afraid of him, and he maintained a stern, cold, and distant manner. I have never seen a man more exquisitely calm, self-confident, and self-controlled. I shall never forget the first weeks I spent at the villa. The weather was magnificent. We had left town the 9th of May, on St. Nicholas's Day. I rambled, sometimes in the garden of our villa, sometimes in Neskutchny Park, sometimes beyond the city barriers. I took with me some book or other, a course of Kadanoff, but rarely opened it, and chiefly recited aloud poems, of which I knew a great many by heart. The blood was fermenting in me, and my heart was aching, so sweetly and absurdly. I was always waiting for something, shrinking at something, and wondering at everything, and was all ready for anything at a moment's notice. My fancy was beginning to play, and hovered swiftly ever around the selfsame image, as martins hover round a belfry at sunset. But even athwart my tears and athwart the melancholy, inspired now by a melodious verse, now by the beauty of the evening, there peered forth, like grass in springtime, the joyous sensation of young, bubbling life. I had a saddle horse. I was in the habit of saddling it myself, and when I rode off alone as far as possible, in some direction, launching out at a gallop and fancying myself a knight at a tourney, how blithely the wind whistled in my ears, or, turning my face skyward, I welcomed its beaming light and azure into my open soul. I remember, at that time, the image of woman, the phantom of woman's love, almost never entered my mind in clearly defined outlines, but in everything I thought, in everything I felt, there lay hidden the half-conscious, shame-faced presentiment of something new, inexpressibly sweet, feminine. This presentiment, this expectation permeated my whole being. I breathed it, it coursed through my veins in every drop of blood. It was fated to be speedily realized. Our villa consisted of a wooden manor house with columns, and 2 tiny outlying wings. In the wing to the left a tiny factory of cheap wallpapers was installed. More than once I went thither to watch how half a score of gaunt, disheveled young fellows in dirty smocks and with tipsy faces were incessantly galloping about at the wooden levers which jammed down the square blocks of the press, and in that manner, by the weight of their puny bodies, printed the motley hued patterns of the wallpapers. The wing on the right stood empty and was for rent. One day, 3 weeks after the 9th of May, the shutters on the windows of this wing were opened, and women's faces made their appearance in them. Some family or other had moved into it. I remember how, that same day at dinner, my mother inquired of the butler who our new neighbors were, and on hearing the name of Princess Zasyekhin, said at first, not without some respect, "Ah, a princess," and then she added, "She must be some poor person." "They came in 3 hired carriages, ma'am," remarked the butler, as he respectfully presented a dish. "They have no carriage of their own, ma'am, and their furniture is of the very plainest sort." "Yes," returned my mother, "and nevertheless, it is better so." My father shot a cold glance at her. She subsided into silence. As a matter of fact, Princess Zasyekhin could not be a wealthy woman. The wing she had hired was so old and tiny and low-roofed that people in the least well-to-do would not have been willing to inhabit it. However, I let this go in at one ear and out at the other. The princely title had little effect on me. I had recently been reading Schiller's The Brigands.